what are your goals? Why are you investing? Are you investing for future you? Are you investing because in 7 to 10 years you want to buy a property and you kind of want to get a little bit ahead on that goal? Are you investing because you've got FOMO with your friends? Like, deeply understand why you want to invest. My personal wealth and my wealth creation journey was not impacted by the performance of that one share. So we need to make sure that not all our eggs are in one basket, because if you trip over, you've broken all your eggs. Like, the fact that you can just type in what you're interested in and it's like, hey, this might work. Slay. Like, be for real. Like, that is actually so powerful. If I could time the market, if I could predict what stocks are going to be doing well, babe, I wouldn't be on this podcast. I'd be in the Bahamas. Like, I'd be living my best life. Call me Warren Buffett.
Kia ora and welcome to this episode of Shared Lunch, which we're recording from Melbourne in Australia.
I'm so excited. Welcome to my house.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was meant to be introduced, but I just jumped right in there.
Yeah. Well, and we're joined by Victoria Devine from She's on the Money, and we're going to be talking all things about investing, misconceptions, and as well about investing in the ASX, which is the Australian Stock Exchange.
Investing involves risk. You might lose the money you start with. We recommend talking to a licensed financial advisor. We also recommend reading product disclosure documents before deciding to invest. Everything you're about to see and hear is current at the time of recording.
Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, water and sky where we're coming to you from today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging.
I'm so excited about this. You've come to my house to talk about our bread and butter. Like, how lucky.
Yeah, thanks for hosting us and for being
Always.
up for the chat.
I'm excited about this. I feel like it's going to be a good chat, but also just a fun chat.
Yeah, well, we both love investing.
Really? Do we? Who would have thought?
And here we are. Now we can share that love, with everyone. You've been in the game, in this world now for a while.
Too long. Too long.
What's different or what's changed about the investing environment since you trained as a financial advisor versus now?
I feel like so much has changed. In fact, I'm probably a little bit guilty of holding on too much because the industry is changing so much. I mean, when I retired as an advisor, you guys weren't even in Australia.
Yeah, wow. Because how long ago would that have been?
I retired in 2021 officially and stopped doing advice of then handed in my license the year after that. And I just feel like it's so much more approachable now. Like, it's so much more accessible. There's also a lot more competition in the market, not necessarily from different shares, but different platforms. And I feel like there's a lot of analysis paralysis from our community about who do we trust? What do we do? Where do we go? But even the idea, and I mean, I'm on the Sharesies podcast, so we're quite clearly fans of Sharesies. But even just the concept of being able to invest with as little as 1 cent, be for real, that was never something that I was able to talk about. And even when I started my investing journey, you would be the same. You've come out of, actually legitimate big dog investing firms. And we used to talk about investments that I could have at the time only dreamed of being able to play with or be involved in. And I remember talking to clients about minimum investment amounts. And there was this one fund that I was like, oh, that sounds so good. But the minimum investment at the time was $20,000. And I remember thinking, oh, that's not for me. But now I can have access to the same fund. And I do now because it was more me going, I don't even want that. It's not even aligned to my strategy anymore, but I want to buy it because historically I thought I would never.
Well, it's hard
so
to
that
have
was
a strategy, right, if you can only afford one investment.
Yeah.
And I think that's
diversification is different.
Is actually being able to have a really great investment portfolio no matter how much you're looking to invest.
If you told me in 2017 that I listened to a finance podcast, I'd be like, what is it? Market updates from Morningstar. I would have thought it would have been very technical and for industry only because that's what that content was like. And now it's this fun topic that everybody can get involved in and it empowers us.
The updates thing is interesting, because it's you definitely, it's numbers. But the thing is it's all the exciting stuff that goes on behind the numbers that's really interesting as an investor. And I talk about that being yes, my job's in finance, but my job is not my own personal finance. So you still got to have it's still got to be interesting to want to do it outside 100%. Of your day job.
100%. And I feel like we have learnt, and I mean, I feel like I've been passionate about this for a long time, but I feel like the market and everyone is catching up with this concept that money is inherently psychological. And so because of that, so many more people are connecting in with this finance concept that they've previously buried their heads in the sand about because it was overwhelming and I'm not good at budgeting and I'm not smart enough or good enough or whatnot. And like, that's actually not true. And that's not the narrative. Like, it's how you feel. It's your money story and all of that stuff that I'm passionate about. But yeah, the world has changed, but I think it's for the better. I would say when it comes to people taking charge of their investment journeys, it's 100% positive.
So quite a big cultural shift then like happened in that time around like more, more financial behaviour, like bringing that in, those good kind of habits, accessibility, becoming more mainstream, just the richness of content now that we can all get access to. What about when it comes to like investing products and what's available?
I would have lost my mind, Sonia, if even like 3 years ago you'd told me you'd be able to buy cryptocurrencies on the ASX. Be for real. Like, that to me is mind-blowing. In fact, cryptocurrencies for me was something that I discussed with my finance friends because we were really nerdy and used to read Reddit threads. Like, that was not something that I ever thought would become part of the mainstream conversation. And I mean, here in Australia, cryptocurrencies are not a recognised financial asset, which, to be honest, I think we're probably headed that way because for me, whilst I've been quite public about not adoring cryptocurrencies because I feel like the risk is too much, and it does blow my mind that so many people are willing to go, oh, I invest in crypto, but the share market is too overwhelming. That's clearly an education piece, not necessarily the truth. And I think that when we have these conversations about cryptocurrencies, people are confused because they say, V, like, you don't like crypto. Why would you want it to be recognized? I want it to be recognized, Sonia, so it's regulated, so that if that's your interest, you're protected in that space. So historically, I used to work in a space where we were working with ultra high net wealth individuals. And so I worked in a position where I had exposure, I think you could say, to a lot of self-managed super funds. So here in Australia, we have what's called a self-managed superannuation fund. So for us, that was always like kind of reserved for the really rich. And for me at the time, I was envious because of the control that you had. So people could pick literally any type of asset. Now that control we have now, and we can invest in literally anything we want without having to go down this very complicated self-managed route. So I don't know, just this idea that things are not only more accessible, but just more fun. And like, how cool is it that we have so much control over our own futures, and what we set up today, it doesn't have to be the same as tomorrow or even in 15 years, but it does count towards future us being in the best possible position. I think that's like low-key really sexy.
Yeah, agreed. So now if we look at the ASX itself, what are some of the emerging sectors? We see like lots of mining, lots of banking, but there's also a lot more going on. Can you tell us about some other parts of the ASX that are...
So the ASX, I don't know, it's pretty special because it's like our little island. We are very big in mining. We are very big in emerging industries. Technology is a really big one here. Education is something that I think is definitely emerging in this space. But also I would say that post-COVID, people have really prioritised essentials. So we're seeing more people at a younger demographic purchasing things like supermarkets and Transurban, which is, they run all of our roads and toll roads here in Australia, here in Victoria and New South Wales and in Australia. And I find that we have gone from trying to find something new and different and emerging to going, hey, how can I find something that helps us beat inflation but isn't blowing the lights out? Because I think our demographic, and this is like Gen Zs and Gen Xs, we're talking about just making sure that future us is in the best possible position. When we hear about what's going on in the broader international market, we hear, oh, there's definitely a recession coming. We are often more protected from that. And I think that that's given our investors and our community a lot more security knowing that. I also think that there has been a lot more pressure put on businesses to be transparent about their ESG policies. I really welcome that. Like, I adore that people are being held to what they are saying, right? Like, historically, I feel like a lot of businesses spoke or talked the talk but didn't walk the walk, and now people are being held accountable. And like that increase in transparency is not just coming from, I guess, the ASX, but platforms like Sharesies who are, you know, deciphering that information for people who aren't investing professionals to be able to absorb, and they're the ones that are going to hold them accountable, because while we might be investing tiny amounts along the way, we have a lot of power en masse. So I think that's really good for us, but also nice to see they're being more responsible.
It's really that rise of the stakeholder, eh?
I don't think anyone really took that seriously until when GameStop happened. And I feel like when GameStop happened and the rise of the minority investor really showed its power, investing companies and organizations had to really go, wow, like we didn't think that people with minor investments in our business would have that much power.
And I think like, I think people as well, like what it is showing is like there is a lot of engagement, and it's a group that should be engaged and unlocks a lot of potential when it is engaged really well. You know, when we started Sharesies, there was this idea that people weren't engaged or didn't want to be engaged, and I think over time you show actually people find this really interesting and want to be engaged. It is.
And like we've been jumping up and down about this for a really long time, Sonia, and finally they're hearing us, and that's really exciting. Like, listen to us. Investing is cool.
Now I think like so much has changed. You're right, around like the experience and what we expect, and I think it is, you know, democratizing access to information. You know, that's what, you're so right. The channels are there to be able to do that. So if we kind of flip now into, say, more investing in general, what are some common misconceptions about investing?
So I would say first thing, you need to be wealthy to be able to invest is the number one thing that I still see in my community. I feel like I'm a broken record, and obviously you guys would be the same. But when you're a retail investor, I feel like so many people go, oh, I can't start investing because I'm not wealthy enough, or I don't have enough money yet. And I think that it's kind of like, I've akined this to like learning on the job. So you go to university for years, right? And then you finally graduate and you get so annoyed because you learned so much more on the job in the first 3 months, and you haven't even finished probation yet than you did in the whole time you were at university. And I think that's investing in a nutshell. You can do so much research. You can listen to every podcast. You can absorb every single written piece of content, but you're going to learn the most when you put yourself into the market. For me, that tangible experience where you've got some skin in the game is going to teach you a lot more than you reading up on how to, you know, do an in-species transfer. So I would say not being in a position to invest because the assumption is you need to be contributing massive amounts each and every single month, or, you know, you are still in debt. That's probably another big one. I see a lot of my community asking the question of like, should I invest if I'm in debt? And I mean, as a blanket response, no. At the end of the day, you shouldn't be investing significantly if you have a heap of personal debt. But when we talk about debt, we need to decipher whether it's good debt or bad debt. Good debt is helping you create wealth. So for me, that's things like your mortgage or a loan that you've got for a business. Whereas bad debt, it's consumer debt. It's things where you've spent the money, Sonia, and you've got literally nothing to show for it except some good memories. And like, don't get me wrong, I used to do that. I was the victim of a personal loan. But so many people go, well, I can't touch an investment until I've paid that debt down, and that's going to be another 7 years. That doesn't mean you can't invest on the side little bits so that you're giving yourself that financial literacy and you're learning on the go and you're feeling empowered. Because I think that when we're paying down debt, often we can crucify ourselves the whole time and be like, I'm the worst. I can't believe I've gotten myself into this position. But if you're doing a little bit of an investment on the side, maybe you're doing like $10 a month. We're not talking like hundreds here, because your debt should be your priority. Like, you're proving to yourself you have the capacity to save that amount. Let's turn that into a benefit for future you instead of going, I can't do anything along the way.
And it's true, you do, like, that experience, sometimes you can only just get that through doing it. I'll say, like, definitely have picked up some great lessons through.
You're just going to learn on the job, right?
Time.
Like,
I write them down now.
Yeah, like, we're all just learning and growing. And I think that a lot of people outside of this investing conversation crucify themselves for being in debt and then label themselves as being bad with money or not good with money, when in reality, Sonia, you just spent more than you earned. That's actually really easy to fix. We don't need to talk about our past mistakes and crucify ourselves. Let's just draw a line in the sand and be like, did you want to do something different? We can. Like, that's completely within your power. And I think that's really exciting.
Yeah. And I like the idea of like, I really struggle with like getting something wrong. It's like there's really no right and wrong. You just got to kind of keep going through it. Or
I'm a bit fluffy that way too. I always say to my team, there are no mistakes. They're either blessings or lessons. Like, it's one or the other.
So, you know, knowing now that people know you can just invest with what you can afford, and it's not about necessarily just one thing, and you can, you know, it's about considering your broader picture with money. Like, we have over 8,000 investments on Sharesies, and you can
that's just a little bit of a flex.
I know, but one of the common questions we get asked is, what should I invest in?
I hate that question, Sonia.
But if
real.
If we kind of pivot that question into, you know, how should people consider that feeling of being overwhelmed when it comes to investing?
I feel like it's a really good question. Like, what should I invest in? I'm so glad you asked, genuinely, because if you're asking what I should invest in, like, you might be ready to invest, and that's an exciting position to be in. But I can't legally tell you, hey, Sonia, go buy ABCDE ETF because it's the best. Because that would be wildly irresponsible, not only from a licensing perspective, but that actually might not be the right fit for you. Like, there is no one asset, and I mean, if a business creates one asset that meets the criteria of absolutely everybody, they're going to make trillions, but that is not what the world is like. That's not how markets work. You need to work that out on your own. What are your goals? Why are you investing? Are you investing for future you? Are you investing because in 7 to 10 years you want to buy a property and you kind of want to get a little bit ahead on that goal? Are you investing because you've got FOMO with your friends? Like, deeply understand why you want to invest, because that why is then going to tell me how. So then the next thing you're going to do, I'm going to assume you've done your risk profile already here. I'm assuming that this person is at the stage where they've downloaded the Sharesies app and then seen, far out, Sharesies has grown a bit. They don't have 6 ETFs anymore. They've got 8,000 options. How do I pick? The question I would then ask myself is, do I want to be a direct share investor, or do I want to own an exchange-traded fund? Now, both of these have their pros and cons. If you're going down the route of having direct shares, that's a bit more responsibility because you've got to make sure you're well diversified. So you can't just go and purchase BHP and be done with it. Whereas you're going to get instant diversification from choosing an ETF. So we need to make that decision of like, okay, well, maybe in the future I might have both. So maybe you go, well, V, I'm a first-time investor, and that diversification thing, it feels really overwhelming. So maybe I do start with an exchange-traded fund. Fantastic. We've already wiped out a heap of the market, and now we're only looking at what exchange-traded funds you would like to invest in. Then we're going to go back to our values. Does it need to be an ethical fund? Do you want an ETF with only women on the board? Do you just want tried and true, something like a Vanguard ETF that you know lots and lots of people use, that's going to make you feel comfortable for your introduction to investing? What does that look like? Are you somebody who just wants an ASX 200 index fund, where that's an index fund that basically takes the top 200 companies in Australia, divides your money across all of those, and you get the average returns of the market. So I think it's about going, well, which route do I want to go down? And then once you're there, slowly whittling it down. It's like an upside down triangle. We're making sure that we're starting really broad, and then and I promise you, if you keep doing this process of elimination and going, no, I do want an ETF. Okay. No, I do want to make sure it's an ethical fund. No, I do probably want one from the top 5 companies in Australia. You're going to end up back where Sharesies started, with 6 options. In saying that, I am a victim of going through your app and just having a bit of a look around. And I mean, I'm not here to sell your app today, but the AI tool.
That's pretty nifty, eh?
Like, the fact that you can just type in what you're interested in and it's like, hey, this might work. Slay. Like, be for real. Like, that is actually so powerful, because right now I can't even Google that and get a clear response. Whereas I can look it up on your app and it will actually give me legitimate options that are currently appearing on the ASX. I feel like it's a really good educational tool. I think people are going to assume that it's a search and it will just spit out product, but it doesn't.
So then coming back to getting information about your investments, how should people do due diligence, or what's some ways of doing some due diligence?
And I guess that's dotting all your I's and crossing all your T's to make sure that this is the right investment for you. And I guess due diligence goes in two parts. There's due diligence, are they a legitimate company? And that's quite easy to check. Like if they are on the Sharesies app, they're legit because they are listed on the Australian Stock Exchange or literally all the other stock exchanges you guys have access to. So that's a very big tick because it means that they comply with ASIC. They, are the Australian Securities Exchange has looked at them and been like, yeah, okay, that's pretty good. But the flip side of due diligence is, for me, is this right for you? Like, I think a lot of the time we get caught up in not just analysis paralysis over deep diving too much, but also FOMO. Like your due diligence is always going to go back to the type of investment strategy you have. So are you a buy and hold type of investor? Like if you're going to purchase a share, Sonia, and I mean, I don't know why I'm telling you this because like you're going to know it better than me, but is your plan to purchase the share, hold it over the long term and benefit from the dividends and the ongoing growth of that share? Or are you purchasing that to kind of like flip it? Like, you know how people flip houses, they renovate them, they make more money in 12 months, they sell it, they move on. Some people purchase shares in order to get that upside. That share might not pay any dividends, but they know that over time it would increase significantly in value. Like that's called value investing. Whereas I'm not a value investor. I can't pick it. If I could time the market, if I could predict what stocks are going to be doing well, babe, I wouldn't be on this podcast. I'd be in the Bahamas. Like, I'd be living my best life. Call me Warren Buffett. Like, I would not, and I can't do that. So I think we need to work out what our investing strategy is to then kind of reverse engineer it and go, well, what does due diligence look like for me? So for me, due diligence is about making sure it's right for you, but then also making sure it's a legitimate investment here in Australia. Same goes for like New Zealand and every other stock exchange. But I would literally go, well, is this a company that I want to be involved in?
Say people are ready to level it up. They've been investing for a wee while. How do people go about getting more knowledge or leveling up?
There is so much free content online. You don't need to go to university to learn about this. There is podcasts. If you're not an audio learner, you can read books. There is a plethora of books on the market. If you aren't like that, you can watch this podcast on YouTube. You can watch videos. You can literally absorb so much content. Like what community can I join that kind of perpetuates that and keeps it moving so that it doesn't become stale or stagnant? Like, do you have a friend that might be on a similar savings or investment journey where you could have like little monthly check-ins with them? It doesn't have to be your partner to do money check-ins.
When you talk about leveling up, it's kind of like, I think the community angle as a way of leveling up, I think was a really unique and I think an actually really effective way of leveling up.
Because I'm obsessed with my community.
But I think it's so true. We know that that's actually what helps us in other areas of our life, and money's the same. Like the ingredients that go into making really good habits in other areas of your life are also what helps you with money. So love that as a level up.
But it's true. Like if you're not ready to publicly talk about, a debt is a massive one. People carry a lot of shame around that, and they shouldn't, because at the end of the day, you didn't have the tools and resources that you have today. And if you're not ready to talk about that, that's so fine. But look how much content and a community you can engage in without having to share your personal details.
I think the other one is like where you think people think you should be better than you are, so you're kind of not willing to admit that you're not kind of.
Oh, I'm the first finance professional, I promise you, that will tell you, do as I say, not as I do. I know a lot of stuff. I would say I'm very smart, but come to personal finances, could you please not look?
So we've talked a bit about diversification.
Yes.
How do people make sure they are truly diversified? What does that even mean?
Diversification in its most simple form, I suppose, is just making sure that you don't have all your eggs in one basket. Like that's the most common example, right, that our industry uses. And it's not it's going to mean something different to other people. Like if you are talking about diversification and you're a direct share investor, historically, when I was putting together direct share portfolios for people, we would have between 7 and maybe 12 shares, and like 12 felt like a lot in that, but every single share that they held was in a different industry. And we would, hold maybe that's probably a lie, we maybe hold 2 banks, like 1 or 2 banks, and see what was going on. We'd never hold all of them, but we'd make a decision at the time of investing as to which bank in that sector was performing well enough and was a good investment and wasn't overvalued or underperforming or whatnot to put it into their portfolio. So diversification in that aspect is something that you have to manage ongoing, whereas diversification can be instant. Like in that situation, these people that I was putting portfolios together for, they were paying a lot of money to have me manage those portfolios on a monthly basis. And I mean, every 3 months I'd go in and make adjustments and, take some profit off some and put it back into another one because, you wanted to make sure that you always were consistent and met their risk profile as well. But on the flip side, we talk about instant diversification inside an ETF, and that's because you've got a portfolio manager or a fund manager making sure that everything inside that asset that you're purchasing is okay and looked after. But essentially, it's making sure that if one industry is not doing so well, another is. Like if you've got 12 different investments and over that 12, one is actually down like 30%. That's terrifying. Like if you said to me, hey V, would you be comfortable with your portfolio being down 30%? Be like, absolutely not, Sonia, not willing to take the risk. But last year, if I look at my share portfolio, there was an asset in my portfolio that returned negative 32%. It made me feel sick. But if I look at my portfolio as a whole, because everything else kind of held it up, my portfolio returned about 14.5%, which is very sexy. But that means that I wasn't all in on one asset. So if one's doing really well, something else is usually just slugging along. But that's the beauty of diversification. My personal wealth and my wealth creation journey was not impacted by the performance of that one share. So we need to make sure that not all our eggs are in one basket, because if you trip over, you've broken all your eggs.
And so once you have built this investment portfolio and it's ticking along, it's not just, set and forget forever.
That's annoying.
So, how do people, how should people be checking in on their portfolio once it's running? And as well, how should people stay informed about the things that are in their portfolio?
You've got the big questions today. I appreciate it. So going back a little bit, this diversification is really important for you to understand. So if you're a direct share investor versus like an ETF investor, or even let's pretend you have 2 ETFs. You've got an international ETF and you've got an Australian ETF. And maybe because of your risk profile, which is essential for you to understand, and if you don't understand your risk profile, there is so much content on your website about it. Like there are blogs. Do you know how often I'm using your resources because I'm too lazy to create my own that I send to the She's on the Money community when they DM us? I'm like, actually, Shazzy's did a really good blog on this. So it's really important to remember your risk profile. So your risk profile, I was explaining it earlier today to somebody. It's kind of like a pie, and you cut up your pie in different amounts. And some people say, I'm not that hungry, Victoria. I only want a little bit of pie. Or someone will be like, I am ravenous. I need the whole thing. And that's where your portfolio is going to differ from one person to another. So if you're like a conservative person, you probably ask for a small amount of pie, and not all of your assets are invested in the share market. Whereas if you are like me and pie is on the table, like most of my assets are in the share market. So if most of my assets are in the share market, and I know that of my portfolio, let's say 95% of my money is inside the share market, of that money, I would have then broken it up. I would have then gone, okay, so some of it needs to be exposed to the Australian share market and some of it needs to be exposed to the international market. And let's pretend I've spent $500 on an Australian ETF and $500 on an international. You cannot expect them to perform identically over 12 months. So in 12 months' time, we go back and check, and let's pretend one's at $750 and one's at $550. At that point, we want to kind of rebalance our portfolio and go, well, one did better. Should I take some of the money off the table and redivide it across my portfolio? So i.e. we maybe sell down some of our Australian and put it back into the international, so we always maintain about 50%. And this happens across the board. So even if you were a direct share investor, you might do that across a number of different options. And over time, investments are going to perform differently. So we need to make sure that we kind of sell down something, or maybe we the next month tip a little bit more money into the other one to get it back to that balance. And that's where diversification is really important, but also rebalancing is going to mean that diversification doesn't completely go out of whack.
And so talking about diversification, and how does property fit in?
Property is something that is the great Australian dream over here, right? I feel like New Zealand's not that far. Yeah, like we just have different accents but same values, right? Like we all want to own our own home, and it's getting further and further away from being the reality for most of us. That's so important to highlight, because I think so many of us have our parents or our parents' parents telling us, like, why haven't you built property yet, Sonia? And you're like, because I can't afford it. It's 14 times higher than my salary. And when you purchased it was 4 times. So it feels further away, but property does make up a really good part of your portfolio if that's what you want. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to go and buy your family home. And I've got a bit of a controversial opinion here, and that is that your family home is not an investment. And I don't believe that the home you live in is an investment, because in order to benefit from that investment, you have to sell it. And most of us, if you purchase your family home, Sonia, and you live in it, like let's say you bring up a heap of kids in it, and then you've retired, and we're sitting on the front doorstep reflecting on the fact that we have 2.5 perfect children and we're still married in our rocking chairs. I don't want for you to be able to officially retire, for you to have to get rid of that asset that holds so many memories. Whereas if you have an investment property, that's a different story. Like even when it comes to picking investment property, we are picking it based on returns and location and potential growth. We're not picking it based on love and how much you really like that, and how much you really like that clawfoot bathtub, right? Like there are different values at play. But I think it's also important to highlight that in the share market, you can invest inside property, or you can have exposure to property in the share market through an REIT. So a real estate investment trust is an asset, a bit like an ETF, where they purchase real estate, and then the returns of that REIT, which you purchase just the same as an ETF, are from property. So if you're not ready to purchase your first home, or you just love the idea of property and you're really passionate about it, and you go, well, V, I like shares, but I love property, I'd love to have that. You can have it as a part of your portfolio without having to be a landlord and pay for the hot water service when it breaks.
We've gone all over the place today, covered so much great stuff.
I feel like we've been everywhere. We've been around the investment world. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh, thanks heaps for joining us. So before we go and wrap up today, it'd be great. We talked about that AI search tool. If you want to go give it a go, you can do that on the Sharesies platform. Just log in, go to your where your investments are, and you can go to investment portfolio, AI search, and search whatever you want in your own words. Have a play around and see what comes back. Thanks again, Victoria, for joining us.
No, thank you for having me.
And sharing your epic insights about the ASX and also about just investing in general. You can watch this on Shared Lunch on YouTube or follow on your favourite podcast app. Catch you next time and have a great week.
See you.